Thank you, Pastor Taylor. I'm Jenn Riedy, and I have attended First Presbyterian Church of Allentown since fall of 2018, and I became a member in 2019, a lot because of the unanimous vote to accept Pastor Taylor. I really knew that this was my church home. I'm here today to talk about brokenness as a parent of an LGBTQ child and how the church has impacted on that. I have 6 children. My little shadow here is my youngest, Joshua. He's 9 years old, and my oldest daughter is 23 years old. My story of brokenness as a parent of an LGBTQ child actually starts with my family of origin. My father was the oldest of 5 siblings. His youngest sibling, my Aunt Elizabeth, is just 12 years older than me. When I was growing up, we didn't talk about LGBTQ issues at all. It was not the hot button issue that it is today. I actually didn't know that such a thing as a gay or lesbian relationship existed until I was in high school. Now, through this time, I came to know, Joshua wants to help me, but he doesn't even know what my talk is. I came to know that my Aunt Elizabeth had a roommate that came to all the family functions, and she was very sweet and nice. And I thought, how sad that this roommate didn't have her own family to spend family functions with. I didn't know that they were partners because we didn't talk about it in our family. She was just there. In college, finally, I asked my Aunt Judy, who's 1 year older than my Aunt Elizabeth, if they were lesbians. And what my Aunt Judy told me was, everybody assumes it, but we don't talk about it. It was very ironic that that was right before Bill Clinton was elected president and we got the don't ask, don't tell policy in the US military, because my family definitely had a don't ask, don't tell policy. But of course then LGBTQ issues became more of a hot button issue, and conservative churches especially picked up on that. And it became very much an issue of a special sin that we condemned the LGBT community for this choice of licentious behavior. And I accepted that teaching, and I believed it. And I shared with my friends and my family that I felt that being LGBTQ was a sin and that it was incompatible with Christianity. In fact, my freshman year of college, I signed up for a Christianity 101 class, which I dropped out of because the teacher expected us to say that Sodom and Gomorrah was not destroyed for homosexuality, but rather inhospitality, and I couldn't do that. Well, spoiler alert, they weren't destroyed for inhospitality. They were destroyed for trying to rape those visitors. It was not about consensual, loving relationships. So then, as I started to have children, 1998, 2000, 2002, 2004, I started to realize that chances were high that one of my children would probably be LGBTQ, and I thought about how would I handle this situation? And I decided that I was very enlightened in that I didn't believe it was a choice. I believed it was something that was in us, inborn. But I still thought it was a sin to act on that. I equated it to having a desire to steal something. Well, that's, it's inborn, but you don't act on it. I still thought it was a sin. I thought if one of my children came out as LGBTQ, I would still love them, I would still support them, but I would try to pray the gay away. In 2012, there became the big issue with Chick-fil-A supporting traditional marriage. And I didn't see how harmful that was to the LGBTQ community. I thought that was their right to support traditional marriage. At that time, I felt that LGBTQ people should be allowed to marry. I felt I shouldn't impose my religious beliefs on other people. I thought I was enlightened to have that belief. And so I posted one meme on Facebook about the Chick-fil-A issue. And my Aunt Elizabeth contacted me, very hurt, about the hateful words that I had put on there. And I was very shocked. I didn't see them as hateful. I thought it was my right. I wasn't trying to impose my beliefs on her. In fact, I had never told her that I disapproved of her being a lesbian. I sat silently in judgment of her, even though, truth be told, I had described her previously as more of a Christian than my fundamentalist father was, because of the way she acted with love towards people and helped people. She cut me out of her life at that point. She didn't let me have a chance to explain myself. She blocked me on Facebook. And truthfully, I didn't know what to say to her at that time, but it became a catalyst for me to really start investigating. What does the scripture say about this issue? And at the same time, I had a nephew, son of a Baptist preacher, who was quite liberal in his beliefs. And so he and I talked a lot. He directed me to a lot of resources. I looked at what does the Greek and Hebrew say? What was the culture that these verses in the Bible were speaking into? What did they really mean? One of the things that was very helpful for me, a very easy read, was this book called Torn by Justin Lee. Justin Lee grew up in a Baptist church and realized when he was a teenager that he was a homosexual. And this book really goes through the scriptures. So that was over the course of about 2012 till 2016, when my second daughter came out to me as a lesbian. It was a shock. She wasn't the child that I thought was going to turn out to be LGBTQ. I had another one pegged, and he is not. I accepted and I loved her, because by that point, I had firmly decided it was not a sin to be in a consensual, loving LGBTQ relationship. But that same year, some of you might recall that in the East Penn School District, there was quite a controversy about allowing transgender children to use the bathrooms of their chosen gender. It made national news. What didn't often appear, in fact, I don't think it ever appeared in the newspaper articles, is that the woman and the child who spearheaded that protest, her husband, the child's father, was the pastor of outreach at the church I went to. In the newspaper, it almost seemed like it was a single mother and her child because the father was never mentioned. We talked about that over the dinner table in my family, how hurtful that protest was to transgender students. But I never asked my daughter, how did it make her feel? I never asked her, what was her experience in the youth group at that church? I just trusted that was our church family. We loved them. We had been a part of that church for over a decade before my daughter came out to me. In the youth group of that church, she heard that homosexuals only cared about sex. They just wanted to live a hedonistic lifestyle. They didn't care about other people. They didn't care about God. They just cared about sex. She heard that homosexuals could not be Christians, that they were definitely going to hell. She never told me that until she was in college. And that was when I started coming to this church. I let her down. I didn't protect her from that hurt that left her crying herself to sleep for years as she struggled with whether she was actually attracted to her best friend. I was also hurt as the parent of an LGBTQ child, and one of my other children has now come out as gender non-binary. I couldn't share with my friends in church my fears of how my daughter might be discriminated against. I couldn't share how hurtful it was to hear from the pulpit that my daughter was an abomination. It hurt. I love my daughter, as any of you with children know you love your children. My daughter and I are estranged now, in part because I didn't stand up for her. I didn't find a safe environment for her. And that is why when Pastor Taylor came and did his first sermon here, and then I was the first person to speak on his behalf, I said that it was so important for our youth that we need someone like him in leadership. We need our children to know that all kinds of people are loved and accepted by God. And I will not be a part of a church again that does not accept every person. Thank you.